Het-Heru, Heru Nefer, Assalamu alaikum. This is Kasank Ma Keperu, and I'm here with another broadcast for you. And today I want to talk about the Nefertiti controversy. And it seems to be always some controversy surrounding Nefertiti. So if you are not aware, if you've been living under a rock, Nefertiti is the queen. She's the queen of ancient Egypt around the 14th century BC. And she is the wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten, and he, in some circles, is considered the one who put forth the idea of monotheism, the belief in one God, atheism or Aten. Now, it stirred some controversy because there is a bust of Nefertiti that does exist, the show called Today, released a bust of Nefertiti. And let me just read from the actual press release article here, because I don't want to, go get too far off here. Josh Gates, in promotion of his new special on the Egyptian Queen Nefertiti, stopped by the Today Show to show off a newly completed bust of Nefertiti based on the DNA remains of the HBIC. Unfortunately for Mr. Gates and the Today Show, their Twitter mentions were flooded when Black Twitter saw a clip of the unveiling and something seemed a little off. Now, the bust, which I'll put up here for you to see, is basically a white woman and very pale. Very, very pale. It's hard to believe that this woman would be in the desert, right? And you can see her light eye color, dark pigment eyes allow you to survive in a hot tropical climate, as well as pigmentation or what we call as melanin in your skin. So of course you have a lot of people up in arms about this. But let me explain what's going on here, and forgive me because I have a little bit of a cold I'm trying to get over. So the Today Show did this during Black History Month, and they revealed this bust, and in the background you'll see there's these pyramids and all that. And they knew darn well this would cause some problems and some controversy among African Americans. And it is a blatant insult. Now, the fact of the matter is that Queen Nefertiti, which means the beautiful one has come, was a white woman. She was a foreigner of Median origin, and she married Akhenaten, whose real name was Amenhotep IV, I believe. And at that time, the Median kingdom in Egypt were competing for control of Syria. So it made sense for Akhenaten to take a Median wife to solidify their alliance and control Syria. And also with that, if you've watched previous videos on this subject, I talk about the difference in culture. Nefertiti's culture believed in the one God concept, and the ancient Egyptian Kemetic people were, as the Egyptologists call, polytheists. They believed in more than one God, many deities. But that's not actually true. They did believe in one God who came in the form of many. But that was too hard for these left-brain Egyptologists to understand. See, as I talked about before, Nefertiti comes from a left-brain culture which is very segregative or syllogistic logic. So they are not adept at synthesis. So they're only into segregative thought process, which seeks to separate, label, define, and categorize. Whereas the right brain, which was the Egyptian people, right brain integrated brain thinkers, whole brain thinkers, were masters of synthesis, which is where you get holistic thinking from whole brain thinking, and which is why that culture is primarily dealing with the afterlife, meditation, because those are all right brain things. When you meditate, you go into a trance state and you access the right brain, which is why you have Nefertiti and her culture, which is the Median culture, and the ruling elite were Indo-European. So they were basically left brain, and left brain looks at a hierarchy. So the idea of one God in control and a powerful God came forth out of their culture. Do you understand? So, and there was no other, other gods, it was just the one. So Akhenaten, when he took her as a wife, adapted that philosophy, which came the worship of Aten, or you can say the sun, all right? And what he did was, he was a pacifist, or he was peaceful, and he demilitarized Egypt. And then he took his followers who believed in the religion of Aten, and they went out to Egypt and created their own temples and space outside of Egypt where they could worship. But under his rule, he almost left Egypt open to foreign invasion by demilitarizing it. And later on, the priests had to step in and do something about that, because they were not going to tolerate this Aten belief system, and also opening Egypt up to foreign invasion. They were not going to allow that to happen. The priesthood was very powerful at the time. So anyway, going back to this insult. So it's not an insult that she is white. That's a fact. Well, I won't say a fact. I can say the evidence is leading in that direction. But it's interesting of how this Josh Gates talks on his program, and he reveals the bust and says the skin is all accurate. Everything is accurate and factual. And he's a damn liar, because I don't understand how you could tell eye color, and you definitely know that's not her skin color, because you cannot exist in a hot climate like the desert without having some type of pigmentation. So the melanin is there to help you survive in the sun, So this is why we have white people from Europe who don't have melanin. They lack vitamin D because the sun was not prevalent. It was cloudy. It was cold. It was dark. So you lose pigmentation. So this is not, the scholars know, the Egyptian scholars know the truth. They know this bust is a fraud. This recreation that he's done is a fraud. They know that the Egyptian people were, or the black women, the Egyptian women were black, dark, or the Egyptian people were black Africans. But the thing is, you see, if you've gone through these prestigious universities to study archaeology and Egyptology, and you come out and you start talking about the truth, you'll lose your grants, you'll lose your funding, they'll ostracize you, you won't get your papers published, and in some cases, if you are too much of a champion for this, you'll be killed. And hence is why you see in modern media, where you have all of your African-American celebrities who are worth billions or millions of dollars, like Oprah Winfrey, Tyler Perry, they're not doing anything akin to the Ten Commandments or Exodus or any of these type of Egyptian movies with African-Americans, because they would get blacklisted from Hollywood. And this is a very hot topic, and not many people want to touch it. But you can blame these Christian pastors like T.D. Jakes, Frederick Casey Price, Creflo Dollar, who have not pulled their money together to accurately showcase what the Egyptian people look like, how they live spiritually, and the whole thing, because these Christian ministers could, in fact, finance a film. We know that T.D. Jakes has financed films before in the past to push his Christian doctrine or his prosperity ministry, but they don't want to do this because there will be repercussions, This is why you're not seeing a lot of Egyptologists step forward to say this is outrageous, this is not science, this is crap. Now, let's understand something. Let me take you back. So you have Howard Carter, who discovered Tut's tomb and paraded all these pieces out. We're now understanding that this may have been a staged event, that Howard Carter probably did not really discover King Tut's tomb, because there's so many discrepancy between the artifacts. And the truth of the matter is, the bust of Nefertiti is not, we don't even know that's truly Nefertiti's bust that was found. In fact, there were two busts of her by sculptor Tutmos. And the one that they picked to showcase to the world was the one that had the European female features. They didn't pick the other bust. They picked this one specifically. This is what these Egyptologists do, these so-called men of science and women of science. They cherry pick certain things. They cherry pick which kingdom they want to focus on, whether it be the old kingdom, the new kingdom, based upon the fact of if they could find prominent figures who have more European features or looks. So they cherry pick on that. Even when they did the DNA testing of King Tut, they did not want an independent DNA test done. And then suddenly they conclude that his ancestry, he comes from Western Europe. Well, one thing for sure is how do we know that's actually King Tut's mummy? Because we have no access to the mummy that the DNA tests were done. We know that the famous physicist and archaeologist, the Egyptologist, Chekhov Diop, actually went ahead and did a lot of research into the culture, the linguistics, testing the mummies, and he concluded that they were of dark skin, hue, pigmentation, African origin. All right, but when we have these crooks and these liars who come from the oligarchy, the ruling elite, because the ruling elite is into the black magic, the occultism, and they know that ancient Egypt was all about magic, was all about occultism. They know that, so they're raping the pyramids and the tombs and keeping that information. I propose to you that they say that they don't know how the pyramids were built. The Egyptians were fanatical in the way that they documented their history on the sacred Metu Neter. In fact, we know that they had 3 forms of writing, hieratic, demonic, and hieroglyphics. For a people who was so fanatical about their history and so anal retentive to make sure that they recorded everything from the invasion of the Hyksos to the death of a pharaoh, they recorded all of this. And to not leave documentation of how they built the pyramids, I think that the ruling elite raided the tombs, found how they built the pyramids, and took those scribes and that information out. In the same way, we know, or I assert to you, that the Library of Alexandria was burned down by the same ruling elite. Hypatia, the chief librarian and mathematician, she was burned, the flesh removed from her, because we know that the ruling elite, the Illuminati, do not like women. So anyway, getting back to this bust, again, as I said, they paraded this thing out there, Josh Gates, during Black History Month, knowing that this would upset African Americans. And quite frankly, you don't take a bust of a woman who was a foreigner and then have the pyramids in the background and try to misrepresent her as the typical Egyptian woman. Let's put what the Egyptian women look like on the screen here. This is what the typical Egyptian women look like. This is from their carvings and what they left. Now, Josh Gates is saying that, we did accurately reconstruct her face and all that. Well, you know what? Let me tell you something. There was a book published called Black Spark, White Fire by Richard Poe. Okay? And he did the same exact thing, taking the skeleton of an Egyptian and reconstructed everything. And in the end, he concluded that it was an African black male, not Western white. Okay? So let's get that straight. And even when he did this bust, he said they were being very conservative in how they rendered the nose and the mouth and the lips. But he says we could have even done it further, which would have been even more accurate to make him with a broader nose, thicker lips, and so forth. And one of the things that he points to is how the jaw and the protrusion, and this was also done in a BB special when they were studying Cleopatra's sister, the skull, and they noted how the protrusion of the jaw and all of that was common among the people of color. All right, common among those people of color Okay, I'm paraphrasing. So we know what they look like. This bust of this foreign woman, Nefertiti, the beautiful one has come, of Median descent, is meant to be propaganda and to basically create racial division, to create racial animosity. And they're doing this on purpose during Black History Month. You see, this whole thing of racism and of this undercurrent of anger and all that is manipulated. They manipulate this through social engineering. And they do it all the time. And Alex Jones, I don't agree with everything he talks about, but he even talks about this and how they stage certain events to create like a race war or racial tension. They do this often. But we can't fall victims to this crap. We cannot. So, you know, I've been online discussing this with individuals, and I say this. I say, listen, fact of the matter is, yes, Nefertiti, and she is, you know, the daughter of a Median king or whatever. But that's not the point. We don't even know if that bust of her that was found by the sculptor Thutmose is actually legitimate. And in fact, there's an article that talks about this, because even scholars are standing up and saying that's not the bust that was originally found, which Josh Gates based his reconstruction on. It's not even real. Look, it says here in an article in The Guardian, is Nefertiti a 100-year-old fake? According to a Swiss art historian, the bust is less than 100 years old. Henry Sterling has said the stunning work that was later this year to be the showpiece of the city's newborn Neues Museum was created by an artist commissioned by Ludwig Borchtopf, the German archaeologist credited with digging Nefertiti out of the sands of the ancient settlement of Armenia, 90 miles south of Cairo in 1912. What I'm telling you is that these individuals who have control over all these artifacts, like Zahi Hawass, who's the administrator of antiquities or whatever in Egypt, in Cairo, he doesn't have that position, I believe, now. But all these individuals, Howard Carter, are crooked individuals. And we cannot rely on anything that they say. I mean, when you're shown things, you have to really dig into it and look into it. You know, when they're doing these tests, these DNA tests on King Tut and his family line, and you've got to ask, well, where did you find that at? What region in Egypt? What dynasty? Because we know that in the times of Cleopatra, Egypt, or Kemet, or Timeri as they called it, was a cosmopolitan. It was mixed at that time. And we know that in the invasion of the Hyksos, who conquered Egypt, there was intermarriage, intermingling, because the Hyksos ruled at that period of time. So you've got to look at how they're cherry picking things and then presenting this as if it is a representation of all of Egypt or Timeri. It's not. It's not. You've got to understand the card game they're playing. They're creating the rules. They control the media, so they get to put forth these lies and misrepresentations to cause racial strife. That's all they want to do, is upset the masses. Get blacks to fight whites, whites to fight blacks, and we never really look at who's pulling the strings. So that's really all I wanted to say about this. I can get into a lot more, but get the book Black Spark, White Fire by Richard Poe, which really goes into detail about the whole reconstruction thing, and the subtitle is Did African Explorers Civilize Ancient Europe? And he proves in this book that they sailed to Europe and colonized Europe, the Egyptians. And if they want, and also too, let me explain this. Just because you say something is from, because they're saying King Tut's lineage is from Western Europe, just because you say that his DNA shows that he's from Western Europe, still does not mean that he is not an African, a black African male. Doesn't mean that. And if if you were to say, well, we are finding that he has white blood or whatever, however you want to say it. Well, the fact is, if he is the son of Nefertiti, who is white, and the son of Akhenaten, Amenhotep IV, then his biracial lineage would make sense. That's just a hypothesis on my part, all right? But do you see how convoluted and complicated this could be? And what they do is they parade this bust out there, which has no pigmentation. You know, obviously, if she was really in the desert, she would be a darker hue. I'm not saying she would be black. I'm saying that the sun would make her skin darker. And anybody who's gone to the beach and got a tan knows what I am talking about, all right? So for them to render her as pale white is it's not even science. It's just laughable. It's just, and the reason that they're doing this, the reason that out of the two sculptures they picked that one to represent Nefertiti is because they are racist. Sorry to say, but they are racist. They're no better. In fact, this whole thing, many of these Egyptologists, the archaeologists, some of them have the neo-Nazi background and others have the eugenics background. So we know who is in control of these artifacts and what their agenda is. And folks, let me just say this before I leave off. Nefertiti accomplished nothing. She is a woman of no importance in ancient Kemet, Egypt. No importance whatsoever. In fact, when she brought in that religion of the one God, and Akhenaten accepted it, and Amenhotep accepted it and changed his name to Akhenaten. When he accepted that and demilitarized Egypt, it almost brought that nation down. So if anything, she caused problems. And they could showcase real women of the queens of Egypt, like Hatshepsut, or Tut's grandmother, Queen T. Those two women were powerful women. Those two women accomplished something during their reign, but they won't show you those women. In fact, when you look at the hieroglyphics of Nefertiti, it looked nothing like the bust. It looked nothing like Josh Gates' reconstruction. Look at the ancient carvings in the hieroglyphics of both Akhenaten and Nefertiti. They look nothing, or the creation of Nefertiti looked nothing like the bust or Josh Gates' recreation. And that tells us that this whole thing is just about them picking certain artifacts, picking certain sculptures to represent what they want. And what they want in this case, and what the Today Show did, was they wanted to instill the idea of white female beauty as the master race. Going back to Hitler, this is exactly what they were doing. And in fact, if you remember the film Raiders of the Lost Ark, Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones, he was racing against the Nazis to get artifacts back from them, or to put them into a museum, because he didn't want the artifacts in the hands of the Nazis. Why? Because they were all about race purity. They were all about rewriting history and lying. Anyway, I've said enough. If you like this video, hit the like button. Subscribe to my channel. Hey, you know what? Share this with friends and family. Let's get the word out. And I have a Patreon campaign, and you can support it for as little as $1, or I'd appreciate your support. So until my next broadcast, this is Kasank Mahakaparu, and Amen Ra.